It is my distinct honor and privilege to present Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion and Global Diversity Officer for Walgreens Boots Alliance, you might know them as Walgreens, Steve Pemberton for Mount Ida College's honorary degree.
It's always a wonderful pleasure and honor to introduce our commencement speaker. This year's no exception. We have the honor of presenting to you Steve Pemberton, and as well as having Mr. Pemberton present today's commencement address to award him with an honorary degree. Home has been a special word for you. And your true home and place in society has been a journey. You've faced many trials and many adversities. For years, you did not know your identity. If somebody called you Steve Pemberton, you would not have responded. You were a young boy taken from your mother at age 3 and placed in a foster home when you were 5. For the next 11 years, you suffered in that circumstance. You were left to wander and wonder how a boy like you would fit into and succeed. Then one day, out of a neighbor's kindness, a box of books opened the door to a path that would take you where you are today. One of the country and the world's leading authorities on diversity and inclusion in the workplace, as well as a model for many others to follow. Books were always a refuge from you. You read about those who fight for what they believe in and who rejoice in victory. For you, victory was to excel in school. But one would not just be a reader. You would not just be a reader. You would become an author of words that would inspire many others to confront the wrongs that exist in our society and make them right. When you were just 1.5 years old, a caretaker said that you were a boy who would not have a chance in the world. You took a book title from that remark, your inspirational chronicle of your journey, A Chance in the World, an orphan boy, a mysterious past, and how he found a place called home has inspired so many who want to achieve and want to achieve the best. Today, you are Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion and Global Diversity Officer for Walgreens Boots, which is, in our country, Walgreens. You helped lead the first global pharmacy-led health and well-being enterprise in the world. Your organization employs 370,000 people in 25 countries. Today, Steve Pemberton, you are recognized as an expert on matters of diversity and inclusion and its importance to the sustainability of organizations and communities which they serve. The accolades pour out to you for the difference that you make. Under your leadership, Walgreens has risen to a record level of performance in nearly every measure of diversity and inclusion. You've served as a public ambassador on matters of employing people with disabilities and capacity, and have frequently represented Walgreens before Congress and visited the White House. You were appointed by the Secretary of Labor to serve on an advisory committee for the competitive integrated employment of people with disabilities. As you have risen in the ranks, you have continued to be a tireless advocate for the disenfranchised, and you have striven to make them people who are incorporated into society at large. We could go on about your publications, your appearances in the media, the work you have done inside and outside your corporation, but you are in fact a model for all of us, and we are grateful to have you here today to celebrate with our graduates. Chairman Burns, I am pleased to present Steve Pemberton with a degree of Doctor of Humane Letters, honoris causa. Mr. Pemberton will now take this stage and deliver the commencement address.
Thank you, President Brown, for that wonderful, wonderful introduction. I have to tell you that there's a couple of times I was tempted to look around, inquiring as to whether or not it was me you were actually referring to. But thank you very much. And good morning, Mustangs. Good morning. So, President Brown and members of the board, members of the faculty and administration, parents and graduates, honored guests and graduates, and most importantly, to the Mount Ida College class of 2016. Thank you for inviting me here to speak at your most magnificent commencement ceremony. It is equally important, I think, to acknowledge the hard work and efforts behind the scenes of those who have beautified this campus, whose powers extend to apparently giving us some reasonably good weather, and perhaps most importantly, a sturdy tent above us. George Bernard Shaw, the playwright and activist, and actually was a founder of the London School of Economics, had a speaker come to campus once, and he informed the speaker that he had about 15 minutes or so to deliver his remarks. The speaker, clearly a man of considerable self-importance, asked Mr. Shaw, "How can I tell them all that I know in just 15 minutes?" To which Mr. Shaw replied, "I would advise you, sir, to speak very, very slowly." So never has that lesson on speaking briefly been more important on a day like today. Commencement speakers often talk about what struggle they have in preparing what they should say. Maybe it's because commencement speakers know that deep down inside you've heard it all before, in some way, shape, or form. Most often from your proud parents and extended family, who, trust me, are sitting here today trying to figure out how is it that they are here at your college graduation when you just came home from the hospital yesterday. And maybe it's the unstated job description of a commencement speaker. You ought to be brief, but be memorable. You ought to be profound, but funny. You ought to be wise, but relevant. And perhaps most importantly, you ought to be here and then be gone. See, I feel none of this pressure to be memorable because I know how impossible it is. You're going to forget about me. I'm fairly certain. And I'm cool with that, as Wiz Khalifa would say. I don't think I've ever had a university president a rap album in your future. But on this day, the truth of it is that there's so much history, so much sacrifice, so much joy and celebration. It is absolutely right that we are but mere observers. I think because years from now, what you will remember about this day is that you were never again assembled like this. You will remember locking eyes with that professor who went that extra step for you, a word of good luck from the coach who demanded and believed in your best. You'll remember that friend who was there for you in a time of need. You will remember the person who you wished could be here. You will remember your mother's embrace, your father's chest swelling with pride, a grandparent's smile. You will remember the way your younger brother or sister gazed up at you. You will remember. You remember that each thread of tassel that hangs from the crowns you wear represents the dreams of those who sacrificed for you, who believed in you, who endured for you, who prayed for you. Being here this morning is more important to me than words can convey. Many years ago, I attended my own college graduation less than a mile from here. And I attended it alone, the byproduct of long-deceased parents in a society that struggled with what to do with a young African-American boy with blue eyes and blonde hair and a Polish last name who fit none of those boxes that we so often artificially create. And so as I walked across this campus today, as I saw those precious moments of joy, as I walked in here, a father hug his son. It gave me windows into what I wish could have been for me, and for that I am truly grateful. And I also hope you will understand and can forgive me for jumping into some of your family photos after the ceremony. Listen, I know I said that you would forget me, but I didn't say I was going to make it easy. Now, this is supposed to be the part where I am supposed to impart upon you some advice. But the real truth of it all is that some of my biggest successes came when I ignored the advice I was given. The most truthful advice I ever heard given to somebody about to graduate was this: don't stay here in this sanctuary. Listen to the bagpipes some more in your president's upcoming rap album. I'm expecting some royalties there, President Brown. But you know that you can't stay here. Life and time marches on, and so must you. But as you do, let me offer you not advice, but some things I've learned along the way. And even those words you should treat like my children treat a box of chocolates. Take a bite, and if you like it, it's all yours. And if you don't, well, just put it back. Maybe somebody else in the family will eat it. I want to tell you in advance that these suggestions are not all connected, and they don't have to be. So if you don't understand some of this, do what I do when you're often confused. Nod and laugh anyway, and then figure it out when you get back home. So here's some things I've learned. I've learned that nearly every successful person you'll meet did something they didn't want to do in order to get to where they needed to go. I've learned it's important to choose impact over power and prestige and popularity. I've learned that the real heroes today are not the ones on your television screens, but the ones alongside you and the ones here in the back of the room, and perhaps most importantly, the one within you. At this point in time, the most important person you should look to now is that future version of yourself. Pursue him, pursue her. There's one question you should ask yourself every day: what dream would I pursue if I knew I could not fail and I would not disappoint? Because I've also learned that it is fear, not ability, that most often gets in our way. And speaking of fear, I met a woman from New Jersey once who I immediately knew was magical. She was vacationing with her friends, and I was vacationing with mine. 24 hours later, she asked me what was my last name. And I said with great audacity and temerity that my last name is Pemberton, and one day that will be your name too. 19 years later, it remains the scariest, boldest thing I have ever said, and the wisest decision I have ever made. There are several life lessons in there somewhere, including perhaps what not to say on a first date. And for you enterprising young men out there whose eyebrows raised when I said that, never say that to a woman unless you mean it. But perhaps the most important lesson is that when you sense magic and when you see it, pursue it with all that you are. I've learned that sometimes you'll find yourself in the shadows, and oftentimes not of your creation. And believe it or not, that's okay as long as the shadow is moving. Don't stand anywhere once you have lost the ability to learn and to grow. This is true personally, it's true professionally, and it's particularly true in your 20s. Don't try and script this thing called life. It's filled with ironic and beautiful coincidences which you cannot predict, nor should you want to. I was here last spring receiving an honorary doctorate from my alma mater, and as I approached the stage, the predominant thought in my mind was that I am the only person here who realizes that some 25-odd years prior, it was my responsibility after graduation to pack up the stage and the chairs. It never occurred to me then that I would perhaps one day be seated upon it, much as I am honored to be here as well. I've learned that while it is often said that great minds think alike, the flip side of that coin is that one of those minds is redundant. Surrounding yourself only with people who look like you and think like you robs you of one of nature's greatest gifts to humanity, and that's diversity. You should make sure that those you call leader, those you elect, those you follow, those that you become have earned that title with their actions and their commitments to others. I have this theory that one of the reasons whales end up stranded on the beach is because they're following that fool up front who swears they know where they're going. I've learned that the greatest prisoner of all are the words, I could have been, or I should have done. And with every fiber of your being and all the strength you can muster, take every risk necessary so that those labels will never be applied to you. For the leaping is just as important as the landing. The two most powerful emotions in the human condition are love and regret, but they share something in common. You have very little say over either. But one of those emotions is God's creation, and the other is ours. I'll let you figure out which one works best. There was a boy once for whom nearly every day of his childhood was told he was dumb, ugly, and broken, and beyond repair. And today that boy stands humbly before you as your commencement speaker, armed with the knowledge that we must be careful about making judgments and predictions about anyone else. And he's also still mesmerized by the fact that anybody could think that he was ugly. Don't clap at that, I'm only serious. And speaking of work, I'm very, very hopeful that here in this community where you've learned the power of service, that one of you enterprising graduates will convince social media to place a don't care button on their timelines. Remember that you came into the world as an inheritor, but you will most be measured by that which you dare to build. I've learned that the Greeks were on to something when they said the following: a society grows great when old men plant trees under whose shade they know they shall never sit. I don't think the Greeks will mind too much if we revise that to include women too. And we'll take yet another liberty and suggest that we are not old, but we're simply seasoned. I've learned that none of us look like our story, and none of us have the exact same story. But I've learned that if you look hard enough, you will find mutual chapters. I have a last assignment for you. When you get a moment, treat a grandparent or the senior most elder person in your family. Take them to lunch. Put away your phone and ask them simply to tell you their story. Use your mouth and ears in the proportion they were given to you and simply listen. And as you hear their story, you will hear the story of the world, of America, of community, of family. And you will hear your own. And in moments of doubt, that will be the direction you should take. You will often be confronted by an ethical choice, sometimes big, sometimes small. And it's possible that you might be torn as to what to do. But when in doubt, imagine going back to that lunch meeting with your grandparent or elder and having to explain to them your choice. You have another task with which you are entrusted. You have to remind America what has made her great. You will have to remind her that it was not the pursuit of material things, the embrace of the superficial, or the false god of celebrity. It was the pursuit of freedom, the relentless desire to innovate, the unyielding desire to challenge traditional borders and boundaries, the idea that we are greater than our differences, the belief that a better day was ahead. It was because words like values, courage, principle, integrity, fairness, equity, embodied in your family and faculty and staff today, were not just words, but dreams that they lived by. It was truly community, and it was truly family. And lastly, I wish for you all the success in the world, not because the pageantry of this occasion demands that I do so. That, in all honesty, would be entirely too simple. I wish you success because I suspect when it is all said and done, when all your dreams have come true, when you Mustangs have found the cure for cancer and brought further peace to the world, when you have reminded America that it was her willingness to take on the challenges of her time that made her great, when you have rejected escapism, when you have created a more inclusive world, where you have pulled us out of the cynicism and tribalism that dominates our society, when you have become teachers and nurses and dentists and doctors and lawyers and entrepreneurs, when you have saved lives and changed countless others' lives, when you have given deserving children their own chance in the world, when you have become husbands and wives, mothers and fathers, and parents and grandparents, when you have accomplished all of that, I suspect that in the quiet of your own heart, you will return to these years here, to this time that you shared together at this institution that so embodies the great nation of which you are a part. I think you'll look back at these years that bonded you together, and you'll want to do it all over again because all of those successes will have taught you that you could not replicate these years, and you certainly, unequivocally, could not duplicate the people that you met here. Because when all is said and done, and that magnificent runway of your life is before you, you'll know that these people, these moments, shared here in this brief whisper of time, were the ones that truly mattered. We are, you and I, bonded by a common view of adversity, things that we too didn't create, we didn't ask for, but we responded to them in our own time and in our own place. There's a harsh reality that I face every day. I've journeyed into this world, and I'll journey from it, and I will yet not know what it's like to have a mother's touch and a father's strength beside me, but my children do. And that, for me, has been healing. That is, I think, the ultimate lesson of the challenges that we face. Your claim to fame is that you have made Mount Ida great again, and I agree with you. But now it is time not to stop here, to take those victories, those lessons, and carry them forth into a world that so desperately needs you. Thank you for the gift of being your commencement speaker and for bringing me into your family. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.